Hi, my name is Chris Cossidis. I am the managing partner with Polaris Injury Law. Thank you for joining us. Our goal in creating this podcast is what we like to say about our clients is that they are on the hero's journey. In fact, they are the hero. Why would I say that? Well, the definition of a hero is somebody who has an obstacle put into their life, unexpected, unasked for, and that they are overcoming it. The people that you're going to hear from are all folks who have had that obstacle put into their life. And what we're trying to communicate is a message of hope. We want to bring hope to people who are in adversity, that you hear their heartbreak, you hear their struggle, but ultimately you hear them overcoming and how they did that. So with that, I hope you enjoy.
What's going on, everyone? We would like to invite you to the Awakening Festival on the 28th of April, 2023. It's going to be an amazing time of worship. I believe God wants to awaken the Northwest area. We have been asleep for too long. Ephesians 5 says, "Wake up, sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you." Join us for the Awakening Festival as we worship the Lord and ask Him to awaken the Pacific Northwest area and to see His kingdom come. We'll see you there. Grace and peace.
Thanks for joining us today. You're going to hear from Phil McCallum. Phil is the lead pastor of Evergreen Church in Bothell, Washington. He's also the founder and CEO of Philip's House, a place where you create strategic relationships in Israel. Phil, his story, like so many, is one of adversity. What I think you'll appreciate from him is his comeback. Phil finds the beauty in moving forward every single day. And when you hear him talk, I think you're going to find that it's infectious and that he has something to give each of us in how we can approach our life. Enjoy the show. Well, Pastor Phil, I appreciate you being here. I know we've talked a little bit about it, but this podcast has been intended for my clients. As you know, people who are on the personal injury journey, I like to say that they're on a hero's journey. It's the hero's journey, and they're just normal people that have had something happen to them that they didn't ask for, and now they're injured and they have to overcome. So what I have found is that in people sharing from their own personal experience, that offers wisdom, courage, but it gives to the community itself, and it gives strength to other people. And you are somebody I consider a hero. I have enjoyed watching your journey. And before we dive into that piece, can you talk a little bit about what brought you to Bothell, Washington?
Pain.
Pain.
I think it's what we do with pain. So life is filled with all kinds of things we don't expect. And then it's what we make of them that makes all the difference. So, quick skinny on my life, I studied to be a lawyer, but I was surprised and God asked me to be the pastor of a church, which I never expected. And then the next unexpected happened. I ended up in Australia, and I spent 20 years of my life there. Then Hawaii, where we have a mutual friend in Hawaii who got me here and you here. And then there were changes that took place in what I was doing there, which then led me to Colorado. And in each of these places, I was there several years, but I was part of a church in Colorado that went through a major scandal and tragic loss of life. We had 2 people killed on our campus in a mass shooting, and I was part of the recovery process that took place. And then when that season was finished, the door opened for me to come to Seattle. So it was a very unexpected journey, and like I said, it was pain that got me here, but it's what we make of the pain that makes the difference.
Yeah. Part of what I've seen of you in the last couple years, you have transformed through the pandemic. Not just physically, but spiritually. And it all started with what I would say a best friend. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people that consider you a friend, but you have a handful of people that really pour into your life. How did you end up with a best friend at this part of your life?
Pain. So, when the pandemic happened, and for me, the complexity was there were so many people to help. So we have a couple thousand people in our church. How do you relate to them? Which immediately leads to video, which was so important to reach. And so my friend has a video production company that was really significant. Then he went through a huge tragedy, lost his dad in really tragic circumstances. I asked myself regularly during the pandemic, what does the pandemic make possible that was only mentally that I could make it through? And so I would take each day as a challenge. What can we do? There's a lot we can't do. What can we do? So we did a lot of videoing in those days, and through that was actually how the friendship really deepened. Like I had known my friend before that, but he was always behind the camera, and that constant interaction was every week and pretty deep. And then that led to health and fitness. So I love working out. And that's, again, for everybody during the pandemic, you either became a hunk or a chunk. Well, I became a chunk, and then at the end of it, you want to become a hunk again. And so we both started working out together. And there's something about shared exertion. And again, it's a self-inflicted pain. You know, it's something we want in health and fitness. And was really significant, that daily discipline. But the other was just becoming increasingly honest and real and transparent. I don't think we have to tell everybody in the world our story, but somebody needs to know our story. And the close friends in my life, I have many friends, but really close friends, they're not many that you get in a lifetime. And when you find them, invest in them. Yeah.
Well, one of the joys I have is that I frequent a gym that you and your friend hang out at, and I see you at 5 o'clock in the morning waiting for the doors to open. But what I appreciate is, in my former life, I used to be a high school football coach.
Oh, wow.
And what you see amongst people who have gone through adversity together is camaraderie. And when you two are working out, or you happen to be in the same place, there's a different part of you that comes out. There's a part that, like, you look totally excited, cared for. It's a different personality. So I think with people who are in an injury-like situation, isolation is a problem.
Yeah.
What has it meant for somebody to step into your life and you to have somebody to be around?
I think it's easy in public life to hide behind what people think, who they think you are. And so there's that false self and there's the real self. And it's not like we're fake, but it's just the nature of pain. We tend to be guarded with pain. And it takes somebody that we trust to reach our real, authentic self. And I think that's, again, whatever the profession, when you're in public life and your life is exposed, once in a while there's somebody who can get into your space and into your face and find the real person and bring that real person out. And that's definitely happened for me. But the gym is also where I work through pain. So I went through a lot of trauma in my life as a child that the older I get, the more painful it becomes. It actually doesn't get easier. It's actually harder. But what I do with it now is what makes the difference. And health and fitness is part of that. It's where I work it through mentally. Some people maybe need to lay on a couch and counsel with a psychiatrist. I just need to work out a lot. And work through the mental process. And then in that working out time, there's a lot of profound conversations that take place.
Yeah. In addition to this journey, you as a pastor have witnessed so many journeys of people overcoming. What have you seen as the difference between people who make it, people who don't make it through struggle? I know that's a big question.
Oh, it's big. And it's an excellent question. It's actually not a Christian book that really formed a lot of my thinking on this question. How do people make it through pain? The author is Viktor Frankl, who went through concentration camps, and I think his was Auschwitz. And he said it came down to hope. People who had hope made it, and those who didn't have hope didn't make it. And I definitely saw that during the pandemic. And when I would dig deeper, I discovered that people who read the Bible on a regular basis had hope, and people who didn't read the Bible didn't have hope. Because in the Bible, God speaks from another place into our world and changes how we think and how we feel and our whole perspective. So I think the positive journey out is a constant renewing of the mind, because it's changing how we think that changes everything about who we are. So during the pandemic, I focused a lot on research about the renewing of the mind, how that works physiologically, how the brain is actually transformed by our very thought life, as well as spiritually, and this directly connects back to reading the Bible. So for me, there's this constant exchange between toxic thoughts that control our mind, and then displacing that with healing thoughts, which, again, this is where the Bible comes in. It brings in words of life, and it transforms. Back to working out. When I get up at 5 in the morning, I'm not always thinking happy thoughts, but that's exactly why I get up early in the morning, and also why I choose who comes into my life early in the morning. I want somebody who can help me pray beyond my toxic thoughts, and then to displace them with healing thoughts. So I actually go through a really deliberate process where, like, I'll write scriptures down, and I'll stick them up where I can see them. And in the research I went through, there's this 21-day process of exchanging toxic thoughts for renewing thoughts. And it changes everything. It changes your ability to produce, your ability to achieve, your ability to relate to other people, to have a positive self-image. It's absolutely everything.
Our own personal scripts, the things that we've learned over time and how we respond to situations. I do appreciate Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, because when he dives in, he says, between the space of action, there is a moment of choice in response. And what I'm hearing you saying is, when you re-script, you're choosing better responses.
Yeah.
So it's a very deliberate decision.
It is.
In looking at your church and many churches, how have you seen people successfully re-script? You've done a great job.
I've sat and I've watched many people work it through. It's a hard choice to move past self-pity, because self-pity is a very enjoyable emotion, and people initially, when they go through pain, obviously we need comfort, we seek self-comfort. But self-pity is often just reaffirming all of our bad choices and bad thoughts and why we should feel the way we feel and justifying how we should feel. But people who allow others to get close to them, and more than just one other, it's actually a community of others, because there's a lot in the room that can help us if we open ourselves up to the people who are in the room. And the people who make that painful choice and then are prepared to hear a different point of view, to hear things they don't want to hear from a perspective they haven't heard it, and move past the self-pity, and again, to let God's word speak into their life. So when I read the Bible, another intellect is taking over my thoughts. A higher intellect is taking over my thoughts. It's like downloading new software, and it's going to delete the old app and it's going to put something new. And my mind has to be renewed. So back to those who work through this well, they're prepared to hear what they don't want to hear. Because initially when God comforts us, it actually isn't comforting at all. Because he says things we don't agree with, we don't like, because we really would much rather do it our own way. And so at first, like, I don't want to hear that. But the more we receive what we don't want to hear, it just changes everything. And I've watched people change health and fitness, their career choice, deep resentments and animosities, severe addictions, all kinds of life setbacks when they've let God's intellect take it over, his bigger mind take over their small mind.
You have had the opportunity in recent time to dabble in the 12 steps. What did the 12 steps mean to you?
So 12 steps is, as they say, it's like the peeling of an onion and many layers, many tiers. I think it's a healthy journey that's actually what the Bible describes of transformation of the real person. But it's a intentional, difficult process. So for me, I've set aside for a couple of years, Saturday has been my sad day. And it's been the day that I work through the 12 steps, and I keep working it through. Initially, I just did it by myself, and as time went on, I brought somebody else into that. And I didn't want a counselor. I've been through that. I wanted a healthy, skilled, mature, average human being who could relate to me and my story, and that was really helpful. And a place to be honest, and then a pathway to take where you had to face honest questions. And the first is to admit, I have a problem, and I'm powerless to do anything to overcome this problem without a higher power, without God.
The next area, you have a personal hero's journey, something that has been hard to share or really understand. What is that? What has been that tragedy in your life?
I went through severe childhood trauma, and it's complex and painful. It took me it wasn't until my early 30s I actually began talking about it. And when I finally did open up to a professional therapist, what shocked me was he was crying and I wasn't, because he said it was the saddest story he had heard in his career. And I didn't think it was sad. And that was the moment when I realized how deeply damaged I was. And the more I became honest, not just with others, but with God and with myself, and I began to reach out for his comfort, the most amazing things happened. So I see that all of life is a healing journey, so long as we keep open to the healer. So when I made the choice to openly talk about pain, and it began first with my wife, then it moved to professional counselors, and then there came a point where I needed even more than that. That was helpful, but I need more than that. So I'd read this book by a Christian author. She had gone through severe trauma. She had been raised in an orphanage, and she wrote 2 books. The first book was called Dory, the little girl no one loved. And then the second book was No Safe Place to Cry. And the second book just broke me open. I finished the book because it was, she obviously wrote from a woman's point of view, but I could write the same book from a man's point of view. And I closed the book and I prayed a simple little prayer. I want to meet Dory Van Stone. A complete year went by. It was exactly a year to the day. I was sitting in my office and a knock came to my door. And they said, Pastor Phil, the church in the suburb down the road has a major women's conference, and there's been a double booking, and they can't use the auditorium, and they have hundreds of ladies who have nowhere to meet. Would your church be available? So I said, sure. So we turned the lights on, got everything working, and the ladies came. And then again, the knock came to my door, and they said, Pastor Phil, our guest speaker has arrived, and she needs a place to sit while we're waiting for the event to begin. Could she sit in your office? I said, sure. So they brought in this grandmotherly-looking lady who sat on my couch, and her name was Dory Van Stone. She was the author of the book, and I told her a little bit of my story and how I had prayed to meet her. And she jumped over to my couch, and because I was 30 at the time, and she was this grandmother lady, and she said, oh, I came all this way to give you a hug and tell you that God loves you. But I couldn't work that out. Another thing that was really therapeutic, I would go for long walks in the woods. We lived by a state forest. This was all in Australia when this took place. And in Australia, there are some really beautiful butterflies. So I had walked through these woods for years, and I would take this little Bible with me, and I would pray verses. And there was one verse that gave me hope, and that actually made me angry because I was so discouraged. I didn't want hope. I just wanted to quit because the pain was so painful. And as I read this verse, I started arguing with God for about half an hour, telling him why he shouldn't waste his time on me. Go away and help somebody else. But finally I gave in and I said, okay, I'll believe. And then off in the distance I saw this big blue butterfly off in the woods. And I said, and it would be just like you, it was really sarcastic, cause that butterfly to fly from over there and land on me as a sign that you love me. And it did. It flew over and it landed on my chest. And it flew away and it landed on my chest again. Did it 4 times. The next day I walked by the same place. And I said, God, did that really happen? And it happened again. Now I walked through those trees for 20 years and I never had that happen before or after, ever. But that day was the day I needed it. And it actually really got my attention. And that day the Bible verse I read said, the whole creation groans as in the pains of childbirth, waiting for the sons of God to be revealed. And it seemed to me like the butterfly was grabbing me by the collar and saying, get with it, buddy, because we need you, all creation needs you to get on with God's plan for your life so that we can get on with the plan that God has for us. And I did. So that began a profound healing journey that just never stops. And throughout my life, I've been pondering so many healing people that came into my life. And I couldn't have programmed it. Some of those most remarkable people influenced me. Pastors, counselors, authors, leaders, business people. I think, how did that happen? It was simply because I made myself open for God's healing. He has a plan and a purpose for everyone.
For you, part of trauma, and especially when somebody preys upon you, there's a part where the victim could blame themselves. Like, what did I do wrong here? But then the second and probably equally painful part is that the language they hear is, I can't trust anybody. Mm-hmm. Yet here you are. How did you get to the place where you could trust other people, and that it's not your fault?
That was one of the hardest things. Because as a child, what I was told in the trauma was I was responsible. How can a 5-year-old child be responsible for an adult's actions? And the other thing I was told was a whole other level of abuse that was just so much sadistic, was that because of my responsibility, I was going to go to hell because of things that somebody else did to me. And I was like, wow. How's a 5-year-old child process that? So as a child, I would sit at my desk at school and carve the word help in the desk, wanting somebody to help. And at the end of the school year, I remember looking in the desk and the words were carved probably about an inch deep in my desk, because I just carved it every day. Help, 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 help. Yeah, and so around that, I just built a lot of self-defense. And for me, it was largely, I achieved well academically. I could also present information well. Knowledge was a great comfort to me, and it became a defense barrier. And just creating a sense of distance and space to keep people at bay. But it was the more people who knew me well, loved me, and gave me space and time to open up, that made an enormous difference. I'm just thinking through your question, how did I actually begin to trust? I think it really begins with the words of Jesus, because one of my favorite parts of what Jesus gave were actually the very first sentences he spoke publicly. The very first sentence he said was, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." So he actually wants me to come poor in spirit, to admit I have this huge vacuum inside of me. I need help. And it took me probably 40 years to understand what that sentence meant, of coming to the point where I could be open and honest with others, beginning with my wife, with close friends around me, and then progressively become more open with others, but also recognizing not everybody's safe.
That's right.
There's some people that are not safe. So I don't feel responsible to open up my life to everyone. And yet I think people sense that we've been authentic with someone. They may not know what the exact story is, but they can sense that we've been authentic with somebody somewhere, and they can feel that.
Yeah. The people I see you as feel like, it looks like you're being loved. I think of your wife, Leslie. I think of your friend, Ryan. And I know there's a lot more. But to your point, those are people you chose. People who come into our lives that are supposed to be safe aren't always safe. And we're supposed to believe that they're safe. So how did you make two great choices in recognizing, like, who is safe? How did you get past everybody's dangerous?
The risk to be loved is you first have to choose to be willing to be hurt. And inevitably, there's always somebody who's not safe. Jesus himself had a Judas, and everybody at some point has a Judas. And yet Jesus didn't close himself off because there was one person who wasn't safe. He opened himself up, and even to Judas himself. So I know that the only way I can authentically love is to take the risk of sometimes not being loved. But what gives me security is to know that God loves me. There was a really difficult season of my life where I would put myself to sleep at night by laying my head on the pillow and just saying, "There's no condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus." And then I would say over and over, "Phil, you're so loved. Phil, you're so loved. Phil, you're so loved." And that was a statement of what God feels about me. It enabled me to love myself so that I could love others. Because that's what's key. We have to love ourselves to love others, even if others don't love us. So I'm so confident that God loves me, even if others reject me. I know that I'm loved. And that's minuscule. Rejection is minuscule because the majority of people are really good. They do love us. They do want the best for us. And over time we learn how far we go with people. There's some people with us for a part of the journey in life. Some people are for longer, some are for a lifetime, and you really don't know until you take the journey of life how long people are going to be with you. But I've got some remarkable lifelong friends that have been with me, and it's been worth it all to be open, to be transparent. When I was studying, actually, to be a lawyer, I went to high school, college, and grad school with one friend. His name is Nate, and he and I would meet every Friday to pray together for 7 or 8 years. So my friend Nate and I prayed together every Friday for 7 years, and through that built this profound friendship. He became a pastor, I became a pastor, though neither one of us ever planned to be pastors. And he stayed at the same church he's been there over 35 years. It's a church at the University of Kansas campus. And meanwhile, I went around the world, we kind of lost touch. But last year, we reconnected as friends. He invited me to speak at an event at his state. And our friendship went to a whole new, deeper level. And we were able to talk as mature men now with grandkids. We're no longer teenagers. We're no longer young adults. We're now in our now 60, crazy, and talk honestly about things that emotionally we'd never have been able to talk about at 20. And it took our friendship to a much deeper level. So it is so important to invest in good friends.
Yeah. Yeah, the gift is love. I mean, really what we're looking for is love, encouragement. When you were going through part of your journey, there were two thoughts that came to me. A friend once told me, pain makes you beautiful. I was going through a divorce, and I was having to find my second life as well. And it was such a unique moment for me, because the second thing a friend told me was the paradox of the cross is that you can hold joy and suffering at the same time. Mm-hmm. I feel like part of what the world has told us is that at some point you get to the end and you've made it and you don't have pain anymore, you only have joy. Well, that's not true, not on this earth. For you, what do both of those lines mean to you? That pain does make you beautiful, and that the paradox of the cross is that you hold joy and suffering at the same time.
Well, every Saturday morning for the last couple of years, I've let myself be sad. And that may sound morbid, but I do that so that I can be comforted. The second sentence Jesus said publicly was, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." So in order to be glad, we first have to be sad in the presence of divine love. So for months, when I would have these Saturdays where I would get up in the morning early, like 5, and give about an hour to let feelings come to the surface that I didn't really want to acknowledge. And after months of that, there came a point where the comfort and the joy was stronger than all the sadness and the grief. And it's not that we can forget things as human beings, but they get reinterpreted. There's a verse where Joseph in the Bible, who became prime minister of Egypt after experiencing huge abuse and injustice, is met by his brothers at the end of his life. And he says, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. And then it creates this reinterpretation is, yes, all this evil happened, all this pain happened, and yet God allowed it to happen because he wanted good accomplished in my life. And so that's where the pain and the joy come together. Taking time to be sad in the presence of God so you can become glad.
Along those lines, not a lot of people, well, I'll ask it this way. If somebody was to look at you, they would see you pastoring a church, or I know you as a very driven person. I'll see you at the gym, I'll see you getting after the day, and that is not reflective of all of you.
No.
So, when we consider what reinvention looks like, I also am curious. You have a whole new life that you continue to explore. And I wonder what that has been like for your healing journey. You have a project that you're working on right now. It's called Philip's House. Mm-hmm. And I don't think a lot of people who are pastoring a church, have so much going on, are willing to reconsider other passions in their life. Like how are you able to do that, and what is it doing for you? It's a long question, but I want to know.
Two things I heard. One is that because of extended lifespans, we are all given the gift of a second life, because we all live a lot longer than people did generations ago. And the other, a friend of mine who's real entrepreneurial, similar age, he said to me, "Phil, you're capable of doing more than one thing." And that gave me permission, because I thought, yeah, I am. I have enormous capacity to do multiple things. And then I began to think of my life in like trimesters. There's 3 trimesters of my life. The first trimester was largely Australia and the Pacific, and Australia, Hawaii, I lived there. Second trimester has been here in Seattle, and this is third trimester that I'm beginning to see it's in the future, and I'm really excited. And that's connected with Israel and helping people come to Israel, people who have never considered going to the place where Jesus lived and walked. And that opened up just some remarkable doors. So my name is Philip, and Philip in the Bible was a man who had a home where people came from around the world, and they met Jews who believed that Jesus is Messiah in his home, and they stayed there for many days. He had 4 daughters who were young, who encouraged these people who were in the home. And in his house, people got a whole new life purpose. And after that, the people who left his home went out and changed the world. And I've admired Philip for a long time. And I was on a trip to Israel in the normal kind of bus tour. And I sat in the airport at the end of the bus tour. It was my second bus tour. I said, God, I never want to be on a bus tour like that again in my life. I don't know any believers in Jesus here. I haven't met any churches here. What I want to know is, where's the church? Where are the pastors? I want to meet a pastor. I want to become friends with that pastor. I want to make friends here. And then I started praying these really ambitious prayers. I want to get to know Israelis so well that they let me stay in their homes, and I come here a lot. In fact, I come here all the time. I'm just sitting on a plane waiting for it to take off. And fast forward 2 years later, all that happened. And it was a remarkable series of events where I felt led to go to a certain city, stay at a certain hotel, pray at a certain place. And through that met the only pastor in that city, and we became friends, and that opened up a gateway to all this network of churches in Israel, both led by Jews as well as by Arabs. And then through the pandemic came the vision of Philip's House. So Philip's House is a tour company designed so that people from around the world can meet in Israel and see the home of Jesus through the eyes of people who call Israel home. The people who are there, particularly the believers in Jesus, the pastors, the tour guides, the people who own the tour companies, they want to show you their country. And they want to make it come alive. It's not just seeing the ruins, but it's seeing the church in revival. So Israel is actually a very young country. Demographically, it's very young, a lot of young people. And the church is very young. So there's a really strong youth movement. And so I've gotten involved in a major youth conference in Israel that then actually connects with the whole Mideast. So actually right now in Istanbul, there's a gathering of young people from everywhere from Morocco to Iran, and they gather in Istanbul for a conference together. And so what I'm doing is connecting with this. Initially, my vision is beginning in Israel, that we focus tours, and later I want to expand across the Mediterranean and include other countries. So we're having this April a tour coming up that is designed to be both active, so we'll actually get out there and hike trails that Jesus hiked and climb mountains and swim where he swam. But it's also reflective. There's time to read the Bible, and you'll meet believers who are there. And it's a trip designed not to try to see everything, but to see the things that we see really, really well. And if it's okay, I want to tell one story, one place. One of my favorite places in Israel is where I picked up this rock. There's a story of Jesus meeting a deeply traumatized man. And the Bible says he was so traumatized he would cut himself with stones. And I went to the place where Jesus met him, and I picked up one of the stones. And they're really sharp. They're everywhere, laying everywhere. The stone is obsidian, and this man was cutting himself with natural glass. And I had to ask the question, why? Why would this man do this? And I dug into psychiatric journals and discovered that most likely he had been a victim of sustained sexual abuse. And the region he lived in was a region dominated with human trafficking. There were 10 cities, and Jesus wanted to reach all those cities. And so he changed one man. The Bible said after Jesus touched him, he was clothed and in his right mind. And through that one man, he reached the whole region. And I've stood at that site multiple times now and wept a lot of tears for people in pain. And to think what could happen by being touched by Jesus. And you can't experience that by just reading the Bible. You need to go to the place where the Bible was written and the stories come alive and you hold a rock and it becomes real. So there you go. You can hold it. It becomes real.
Phil, it sounds like the trip, in part it's been healing for you, Philip's house. But the hope is that there's a renewal for people. Everybody who comes, they're looking for something. They're ready to change. And that is life. Life is a constant change. When those people get on the bus with you, what do you want them to leave with?
I pray that each one of them has an encounter with Jesus. It's not programmed. It's always by surprise. He sneaks up on you. But forever you will read the Bible differently, and that's my hope. It will always come alive. It moves from being a 2-dimensional to a 3-dimensional, even a 4-dimensional book.
And when these people come with you, what are you hoping that you get when they get off the bus?
I hope I get to be near them when they have their moment with Jesus so I can watch that happen. I was writing down things that I hoped for Philip's house, and that was actually top on the list. I just want to be with people when they have their moment, to see Jesus there.
Yeah. Jesus, when you speak of him, and as I know him, it's always the one relationship that you don't have to worry about trust. Has that been a part of why you have been so driven to lead people to the healer?
Yeah, he found me. And when I experienced Jesus for the first time, I was 16. I would lay in my bedroom at night and imagine reasons why God didn't exist. I was a real intellectual kid. And I had pretty much argued him out of my life. He wasn't there. And yet he came. And I woke up one morning, and I don't know how to explain it, but I felt that love walked in the room. I knew that I wasn't alone. And I sensed there was a person there. And I couldn't explain this because by this point I had argued everything away. And why did I feel love? That's the best way I can describe it. It was love. And I had a sense that if I didn't respond to this visitation, I would miss it. So I got out of bed and I prayed a simple little prayer. God, if there is a God, save me. And I didn't use the name Jesus or anything, but it started a process. And it took probably another 4 years for me to fully come to faith, but it began a process. But when I opened my eyes, it was like I'd never seen color before. Everything was so brilliant. I'd never seen light before. Everything was so bright. And I'd never heard music. I remember hearing birds thinking, why is everything so happy? And joy. That was the beginning of my experience with Christ, was joy. And that joy is never diminished. I've gone through a lot of sadness, a lot of heartache, a lot of sorrow, but that joy has always been there since I was 16.
If you were to give a piece of advice to 5-year-old Phil on how to get through a painful journey, what is the one thing he would need to know?
Never keep a monster's secrets.
Yeah. Phil, I am so grateful that you would take the time to share. And I am so thankful that you are on this journey and I get to be a witness to it. So thank you for being here.
Thank you.